What would you do if the man promising to build your future was secretly planning how to take everything from you once your baby was born? In this intense suspense story, one woman uncovers betrayal, hidden legal traps, and shocking evidence that her husband's lies go far beyond an affair. The deeper she digs, the more terrifying the truth becomes, and soon the question is no longer whether her marriage can survive, but whether she can.
At an architecture awards dinner in Chicago, hosted by my husband Arthur and my brother Julian, a cold unease settled over me. As they presented a new skyscraper project, our baby gave a sharp kick. For weeks, I'd felt a fundamental crack in the foundation of my life. I managed a tight smile when Arthur joined me, his own a polished facade. Hours later, in his private study, I unearthed the betrayal, and my world imploded. This is what happened. I wonder who you are listening to this. I'm curious how far my story will travel. I've altered minor facts to protect myself, so any resemblance to real events is a coincidence. But the betrayal at its heart is painfully true, and I hope it serves as a warning. The ballroom buzzed with quiet ambition and veiled rivalries. Arthur led me aside, his voice a gentle trap. Chloe, my love, you're overextending yourself. Leading the lakefront development while pregnant is an immense strain. I tightened my grip on my water glass, my smile brittle. I'm managing just fine. He covered my hand with his, a gesture that once felt grounding, now felt like a cage. You're the creative genius, not a site manager. Let me carry that weight. Your father would have wanted your focus on our child, not on being chained to his old firm. The comment was a deliberate, piercing strike. That firm was my family's entire legacy, and Arthur wanted to absorb it. A merger, he murmured. A valuation of 100 million. We could buy that place on Lake Geneva, finally escape. Just our family. I pulled my hand away. I told you no. A muscle in Arthur's jaw tightened. I'm only trying to protect you. From across our table, my brother Julian interjected. He had been watching us, his gaze assessing my every reaction. My father left me the company. Julian got a small stake he cashed out for a string of failed ventures. Now he was Arthur's partner. Chloe, he's right, Julian said, his voice flat. This is about the project's bottom line, not sentiment. The budget is spiraling. You're going to tarnish our family's name. I'm not backing down, I replied. Julian's expression hardened. You're being emotional. I'm protecting our legacy. Our legacy is balance sheets. I pushed my chair back with a screech. Please excuse me, I said, grabbing my purse. Chloe, wait, Arthur called after me. I'm fine. The sharp Chicago wind whipped around me as our town car arrived. The silence in our lakefront penthouse was deafening. Their words echoed in my mind. I went to the study to find my father's original blueprints, needing to reconnect with his vision. That's when I saw it. The family media server was active, logged into Arthur's profile. A partition drive I had never seen, labeled Project Siren, was syncing. A deep chill spread through me as I accessed it. It was password protected. The hint was the day you lost him. A knot formed in my stomach as I typed in the date of my father's death. It opened. The first directory was a message archive with a name I knew, Isabel, his lead project manager. There were no secret love letters. It was a cache of corporate documents, draft motions, revised partnership agreements, and timelines. It was a methodical, quiet coup orchestrated from inside my own home. My blood turned to ice as I read the memo to their legal team. The subject was stark: Project led incapacitation clause. He was building a case to seize control of my project, of my entire inheritance. The phrasing was cold and surgical. Cite maternal cognitive load, argue emotional distress, trigger a vote for interim leadership. This wasn't protection, it was a strategy to have me declared unfit. Our baby kicked again, a sudden jolt, as if sensing the danger. Arthur wasn't just a rival, he was the architect of my ruin, and I was his next demolition. I was frozen staring at the files when I heard the key in the front door. I quickly closed the drive, my pulse pounding in my ears as he walked into the study. Still at it? he asked, his voice dripping with faint concern. I could only nod, my brain struggling to grasp the scale of his treachery. Every kiss, every promise had been a blueprint for this betrayal. Our penthouse, once our sanctuary, now felt like the staging ground for my own demise. The architectural models we'd built together seemed to mock our sham of a life. Lying next to him that night, feigning sleep, the sound of his breathing felt menacing. His face was lit by the glow of his phone, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. I knew precisely who he was messaging. The existence of those secret files on our server was a time bomb. I was pregnant, cornered, and married to my most dangerous opponent. Those files were the schematics of my downfall. They held our partnership agreement, falsified budgets for my project, and a folder chillingly named Project Succession. The most damning part was a highlighted clause in the company's operating agreement. It granted the board power to reassign a project lead if they were deemed incapacitated. Our child wasn't a joy to him, our child was a legal trigger. There were legal strategy docs on how to leverage postpartum emotional strain to prove my incompetence, ensuring he'd get control of the project and, by extension, my entire inheritance. I found a saved memo to her, to Isabel. My hand shook as I read about the empire they planned to build from the ruins of my family's firm. She'll be too consumed by the baby to see it coming, it said. The final folder held doctored engineering reports. He'd hired a compromised auditor to manufacture a crisis, creating the perfect pretext for removing me. This was my husband, the man I loved, my greatest adversary. I used to think our arguments were just growing pains, but on March 15th, 2025, I understood the true design of his deception, and I knew I had to demolish it. He didn't see me as his wife, but as a problem to be managed. The vision of my child being raised by him and that woman was a nightmare. He wanted my family's legacy, our baby, everything. I recall Julian's cold dismissal. This is about the bottom line. He wasn't just a partner, he was a co conspirator. His resentment over being passed over had turned him into Arthur's weapon against me. Arthur was betting on me being a fragile, overwhelmed, expectant mother. That was his fatal design flaw. He wasn't just trying to steal a building, he was threatening a mother's entire world. I copied the entire Siren directory to an encrypted drive. My father's old lawyer was semi retired. His number is 6305550184. I knew he would help me defend my father's name. The reality struck me with physical force. Arthur wasn't just unfaithful, he was plotting my professional and personal destruction. For a long moment, I was trapped, a prisoner in my own penthouse, crushed by his lies. Then the fear gave way to cold, structural anger. I went back to the server. Arthur and Isabel kept a shared project calendar. I found their next private meeting, a supposed site inspection tomorrow afternoon. That drive contained everything: 36 audio files, 82 images of altered blueprints, and 20 videos of their secret meetings. My hand trembled as I played the clip. It was a recording of them laughing at how vulnerable I was. Isabel's voice was like ice. The special board meeting is confirmed for Friday, November 7th, at the Willis Tower, Suite 52. We'll cite health concerns and nominate an interim director. Arthur's voice was smug. Excellent. She'll be too tired to fight it. What if she resists? Isabel asked. Arthur's tone was chilling. Chloe trusts me implicitly. It will all be finalized before she even understands what has happened. The recording clicked off, leaving the room in a heavy silence. My body felt numb. This was happening next week. My own husband had scheduled the end of my career. I forced myself to open one last file, dated November 1st, 2025, yesterday. I had to get the original physical documents. His office network had a security blind spot every night at exactly 2:15 a.m. The system rebooted, giving me a 4-minute window with no cameras. It was the only way. I needed the original blueprints from his office safe, the ones with my father's signature. They were the one thing he couldn't fake. I had to call Mark. my father's attorney. He had always been suspicious of Arthur. My deepest apologies, Chloe. I know this is an impossible request. Stay safe. The text vanished. The time was 10:30 at night. Arthur would be home any second. There was no time to think, only to act. I had to see for myself. Slipping my phone into my silk robe, I moved toward his study. It was 10:40 p.m. The building's perimeter security would activate in 10 minutes. His private domain smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. I went inside, lit only by the Chicago skyline. The light from his monitors cast looming shadows across models of gleaming towers. Arthur's entire world was in this room, a landscape of leverage and profit. Just being in here felt like a terrible violation. I had to get to those blueprints. The enormous penthouse felt cold and empty. The only sound was the frantic pounding of my own heart. He would walk through the door at any moment. Photos of us filled the hall. Charity balls, vineyard openings, our wedding day. I traced our smiles. 10:42. He'd be home in minutes. My hand trembled as I turned on his old tablet. My sister-in-law's voice echoed in my head. The passcode is the year his first company went bust. I keyed it in and the screen lit up. It wasn't just old photos. As the device hit the Wi-Fi, a hidden messaging app suddenly buzzed to life, guarded by a second biometric scan. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared frozen as the screen prompted for a thumbprint. The single icon was an encrypted chat I'd never seen. I could hear the hum of the wine fridge in the corner. I used the other secret his sister gave me, a scan of his thumbprint from a glass he'd left. The app opened, revealing one conversation, a life I never knew. Why would a tech CEO need this level of secrecy? My gut screamed at me to close it, but his sister's terrified warning spurred me on. My phone vibrated. 10:50. The house security was arming. A chime from the foyer confirmed the system was active. I was in the study, the only room without motion detectors. Taking a shaky breath, I began to scroll. The screen's glow was the only light in the room, showing a stream of messages, jargon, and logistics. Then, after a frantic search, I found a chat log that made my blood run cold. Isabel contingency. I read the thread, my breath catching in my chest. It was a plan. Not for a product launch, but for liquidating company assets before an acquisition. The numbers were staggering. This was pure deception. A list of offshore accounts in Zurich. This was a scheme to defraud his Silicon Valley investors, not to build a legacy. My stomach twisted into a knot. He was funneling the seed money into those accounts. The chats detailed microtransactions disguised as server maintenance fees, each one approved by him and his COO. It was clean corporate theft. $90 million. I felt the room spin as I read the total. It was a perfect record of grand larceny. Dates, codes, destinations, and every transfer was co-authorized by one person, Chloe. At the top, Julian Croft. Funds to be moved. 90 million over 18 months. Final transfer March 21st to an untraceable account. Amount 30 million tomorrow. My phone shook as I took pictures of the screen. I photographed the chat logs, the wire instructions, the shell company names, the whole criminal enterprise. My hands shook so much the photos were blurred, but I needed the proof before he walked in. I heard it then, the quiet whir of his Tesla in the garage. Then their voices hushed and close. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over me. I shoved my phone into my pocket and shut the tablet down. I had to hide. His voice, a sound I once loved, cut through the quiet. Julian. I'm telling you, she's asking about the old server data. Then her voice. Chloe. Don't get spooked. She's pregnant and distracted. She's not a risk. I won't leave it to chance, he said, his voice just outside the door. My eyes found the heavy velvet drapes by the window. It was the only cover. I ducked behind the thick fabric, my skin cold against the glass. The material muffled the click of the study door opening. I held my breath, terrified. They were in the room. I found a tiny opening to look through, my body stiff with fear. I watched them through the gap. Their voices were clipped now. Julian and Chloe standing in his study. He stood by the desk, arms crossed, surveying the room like a king. Chloe went to the bar and poured a glass of Cabernet, swirling the deep red liquid. The desk lamp threw long, distorted shadows across their faces. I didn't breathe. The air behind the curtains smelled of her expensive perfume. My phone felt like a lead weight in my pocket. If the floorboards creaked, if he even glanced toward the window, he didn't. It's all arranged, Chloe said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The lawyers are ready. 30 million tomorrow at 10, Julian confirmed, rubbing the back of his neck. Good. The window is short, but we'll make it. And our flight? Chloe asked. The accounts will be funded, the money will hit Zurich by 3, we'll be on a plane to Bali by 8. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Bali, it was real. Chloe leaned against his desk. And Isabel. Hearing my name from her lips felt like a physical blow. Julian's face became stone. She's become a problem. I told you she was too much like her brother. I know. Julian's voice was tight with annoyance. I thought the doting husband routine, the baby, that it would keep her blind. But she has his instincts. Chloe smirked. Leo was always too principled for his own good. I bit my lip until it bled. My brother. Isabel will never sign an NDA that gives me full control, Julian said, starting to pace, which means we enact the contingency. Chloe stood up straighter. Are you sure? There's no coming back from that. It's our only move left, he snapped. If she talks to her family's attorneys, this whole deal implodes. Our partners in Zurich are not forgiving. Chloe was silent for a moment, then, what's the plan? Julian didn't reply, he just stared out at the San Francisco Bay. On the still active tablet screen, a new message popped up from his sister. The same as Leo? My stomach dropped. Julian began typing a reply. You know what happened, the sailing trip last summer. He found the bad code. He confronted me. He kept typing. He was going to the investors, so I showed him a freak wave. A terrible accident, a tragic loss. His next message was a single chilling emoji of a man falling into water. 1 minute he was yelling, the next he was gone. I choked back the bile in my throat. The official Coast Guard report called it a tragic accident. His text read, their charity got a nice donation. No more questions. His sister's reply was instant. And you'll do the same to Isabel? Not the same, cleaner. He sent a photo of my favorite green smoothie powder. Saturday morning during her private yoga session. I'll say she seems dehydrated, that she needs a boost. I'll offer to make her smoothie myself. A little gesture. I'll switch her powder with this before she starts. In an hour, her heart will just fail. A tragic complication of the pregnancy. I'll be the heartbroken widower who lost everything. His sister's response was a single word. Methodical. Julian's reply, I've had a year to plan. Julian's cold logic was terrifying. Her family's money was always a hurdle. I just have to move up the timeline. His tone was like a business proposal. Once she's gone, I inherit it all. The penthouse, the vineyard shares, the $15 million policy. I move the funds and disappear. Maybe Costa Rica or Thailand, somewhere quiet, his sister typed. And my part? Julian's response was arrogant. You fly with me, your share is safe. By the time they probate her will, we'll be ghosts. My vision swam. The air was too heavy to breathe. Going dark, delete this thread before I arrive. His sister sent back a single checkmark icon. As the messages began to auto-delete, I snapped one last photo of the screen. I heard his key in the front door lock. I sat frozen in the chair, my heart hammering my ribs. I counted to 60, my body paralyzed by fear. When I was certain I heard the shower running in the master bathroom, I quietly closed the tablet and stood on trembling legs. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the bookshelf, my whole body shaking. In the dark study, my phone screen was my only light. The hallway felt endless, every shadow a threat. My breathing was ragged. I nearly passed out. I avoided our bedroom, sleeping through the living room to our walk-in closet. Inside, I shot the bolt on the solid wood door and slid to the floor. my back against the cool, smooth surface. The phone's light was harsh in the darkness. Julian was going to murder me. This Saturday, at 10 a.m., I had less than 2 days. My fingers shook as I scrolled through my contacts. Our family lawyer, Mr. Chen, had insisted I save a number, a private investigator named Kincaid. The number was burned into my memory, 415-555-0199. My thumb hovered over the screen. It was almost 2 in the morning. Who would answer? Would anyone believe me? I had no one else. Julian was capable of murder. He wanted me and our baby gone. If I did nothing, I'd be dead by the weekend. I took a deep breath and hit call. It rang once, twice. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I huddled inside the cavernous closet, lit only by the screen. Our San Francisco apartment was utterly silent, but a storm raged in my ears. Please answer. A third ring. Was this a mistake? Then a sharp, clear female voice answered. Kincaid Investigations, this is Anya. She sounded capable, professional, and awake. This was a woman who handled crises, who dealt with panic calmly. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. Hello? Anya Kincaid repeated. Is anyone on the line? I finally managed to push out a sentence. My name is Isabel Croft. It was a cracked, terrified whisper. Mr. Chen told me to call you. I think my husband is going to kill me. There was a short pause. Mrs. Croft, I've been expecting your call. Relief hit me so hard my phone slipped from my grip. She knew. I wasn't crazy. Mr. Chen retained my firm several weeks ago. Julian's tone was sober, but not unkind. An old source raised flags about your husband's business dealings. We've been watching Marcus Vance. We just needed a catalyst to proceed. He's making his move Saturday, I whispered, at the museum fundraiser. He's swapping out my anxiety medication. He wants it to look like a breakdown before my accident. I told him everything. The encrypted partition our IT guy found, the password, the affair with Chloe, their entire recorded plot. I included the details of the Cayman accounts. I pulled the transaction logs from the network not an hour ago while he and Chloe were finalizing things. Julian Croft was silent on the other end, absorbing it all. I could hear soft typing. When I was done, he said, Mrs. Vance, I believe you just saved your own life. Those financial logs you mentioned, can you access them on your phone? I confirmed I had copies, and the laptop is back in his study. Excellent, leave it. The evidence trail is paramount. Can you come to our headquarters? I repeated the address. 9 a.m. tomorrow. 1 International Place. The location is being sent to your phone. Bring the phone with the files. I just gave a silent nod. I would. Eleanor, I need your full attention. His voice sharpened, demanding my focus. You cannot mention this call to anyone. Not Marcus, not your family, not a single soul. It's as if Marcus gets a hint that you know, he'll act tonight. He won't wait for the weekend. Nausea churned in my stomach. What should I do? Behave as you normally would. Go to your room. Get up at your regular time. If he speaks to you, stay reserved and cool as you've been. Do not arouse his suspicion. But what if he tries something else? The words caught in my throat. We'll have a car on your street by 6 a.m., Croft interrupted. They'll be invisible. You won't know they're there, but they are. If he tries to move you or acts erratically, they have clearance to step in. His word was my only shield. I clung to that promise. My mind kept replaying their voices, planning my demise. What is the procedure when I get there? I asked. You'll provide a full statement, we'll secure the evidence from your device, and then we'll assemble a package for the DA to get warrants for Marcus and Chloe. Your statement is the linchpin. Without it, his lawyers will claim the logs are fabricated or the network was breached. You are the witness that connects everything, Eleanor. You are the case. The burden felt crushing. I had to be the one to put my own husband away. The same man who was plotting with his lover to kill me and our unborn child. I'll be there, I breathed. Good. I'll meet you at 9. Croft hesitated. Eleanor, I know this is petrifying, but you've handled this perfectly. We've got it from here. I promise. I had to trust him. I had no other choice. Thank you, I said. For now, try to get some sleep. We'll speak in the morning. The call ended. I sat in the darkness, phone pressed to my ear. I slowly lowered it, wrapping my arms around my legs. Croft said to act normal. How was I supposed to sleep beside the man who wanted me gone? I willed myself to move. I was utterly spent, fueled only by a cocktail of terror and adrenaline. I got into bed in my clothes, pulling the duvet up to my chin. A chill filled the air. The only glow was from the alarm clock. 1:47 a.m. I stared at the ceiling, every noise amplified. The building's groan, a distant siren, the whisper of the vents. Was that him downstairs? Did he know I found the partition? Did he know I called Julian Croft? I shut my eyes, concentrating on my breathing. The 6 a.m. help was coming, just under 4 hours away. I only had to endure 4 more hours. I must have drifted off, because a sharp sound snapped me awake, my heart racing. The clock read 3:02 a.m. A noise had woken me. I went rigid listening. There it was again, a key turning in the lock of the front door. I slipped out of bed and crept to the door, peering through the small crack into the dark foyer. Marcus was home. He moved like a shadow toward the master bedroom. I scrambled back under the covers, feigning sleep. My breath was shallow and fast. He wasn't supposed to be here. He entered, a silhouette against the city lights. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. I gripped the sheets until my knuckles were white. He didn't get into bed. He went into our ensuite bathroom. I heard the faint click of my medicine cabinet opening. My eyes were squeezed shut. He was swapping the pills. He was doing it right now. The bed dipped as he finally laid down. The man planning my death was beside me. Sleep was impossible after that. By 7 a.m., I was dressed. My hands trembled as I took my phone and his laptop from where I'd hidden it. I tried to tell myself he'd just come home for something he'd forgotten. But I knew that was a lie. His plan was in motion. I took the service stairs, avoiding the doorman who might mention to Marcus that I'd left. My car was in our designated spot in the garage, cold and silent. I got in, hit the locks, and drove into the gray morning. The 20-minute trip to the seaport felt like a lifetime. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Every black sedan seemed to be following, but the road behind me was clear. As I entered the parking garage near the waterfront, my hands felt glued to the steering wheel. The Croft Securities building was a formidable tower of dark glass, the company name etched discreetly over the doors. I stepped into the spare, quiet lobby. A guard at the desk confirmed my identity. "Mr. Croft is waiting for you." I paced the granite floor, my heart hammering, until a private elevator opened. The investigator was precisely how I'd imagined. Late 40s, with a tailored suit and sharp, perceptive eyes. He wore a perfect charcoal suit, his ID badge clipped to the lapel. "Eleanor," he said, his handshake solid and reassuring, "I'm glad you made it." I could only offer a weak nod in return. Julian Croft led me through a series of modern offices to a conference room at the end of the corridor. A man was already there, his laptop glowing. "This is Alex," Julian said, sealing the soundproof door. "He's our lead for digital forensics." Alex glanced up, nodding slightly. He was around 40, with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Vance," he said softly, "I am truly sorry for what you're going through." I was at a loss for words, so I simply nodded again and took a seat. Julian faced me. "I know this is hard, but walk us through everything you discovered. Start with the network partition." "So," I began. I detailed finding the encrypted drive on our home cloud system. I showed them the message logs between Marcus and Chloe, their detached talk of my baby being a roadblock. I recounted their plot to switch my medication to engineer a mental health crisis, and the sheer horror of hearing my husband in our bathroom last night, executing that very plan. Julian and I watched the screen. "And there it is," Julian said quietly, gesturing to a time-stamped record of a data transfer. "This is irrefutable." The routing to the offshore server was undeniable. He displayed the access logs, his face grim. 7 logins, 3 encrypted folders, 1 falsified psychiatric evaluation. He looked directly at me. This gives us what we need to dismantle his story, Eleanor. The business trips, the hidden assets, all of it. I leaned in. Julian, you've uncovered his second life. But I need to do more. I'm the one who found that drive. I'm the one who heard him lie. My voice felt strained. So what happens now? My investigator's phone buzzed, its screen illuminating the dim room. A text from a new contact he had sourced. Olivia Thorne. It said, I have to talk to you about Marcus. I can't cover for him anymore. Julian's eyes met mine. Is that his sister? I nodded, a cold red rising. His younger sister, Olivia. Does she know what's happening? I asked. Unlikely. We haven't been close since their parents' will was finalized. Julian was already on his feet. Reply to her, tell her you can meet her right now. Where? A car is coming for you. Tell her to wait on the street outside her apartment. Keep it short. My hands shook as I typed, Olivia, it's Eleanor. I'm on my way. Her response was immediate. I'm at my place. Please, Eleanor, I'm terrified. Julian was on his own phone, arranging logistics. Drive her to Beacon Hill. Take her to the Four Seasons. Use the service entrance. He ended the call and looked at me. We need to secure you both. If Olivia is talking, we need her testimony before Marcus knows she's flipped. An hour later, I was in a sterile luxury suite overlooking the Boston Public Garden, filled with chrome furniture and bland corporate art. The atmosphere was cold. City lights glittered beyond the large windows. 2 of Julian's operatives stood guard outside. Olivia was escorted up from a black town car. She looked completely broken when she walked in. Her face was pale and her eyes were red and swollen. In a simple sweater and jeans, she looked fragile and scared. Eleanor, she breathed, her voice a mere whisper. I stayed quiet, not knowing what to say. Julian pointed to a chair. Miss Thorne, please, have a seat. Olivia collapsed into the seat opposite me, wringing her hands. The silence in the room was heavy. Then she started talking. I knew about the gallery he set up for her, she admitted, her voice cracking. Over $200,000. He made me create the LLC for it back in 2021. The bank flagged it last year. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He threatened me. He said he would ruin my career if I ever told a soul. I was backed into a corner. It was our family's hidden disgrace. He promised they'd disown me. Sophie's eyes begged me to understand. He made me get close to her. For a year, I had to report everything. He was desperate to keep his 2 lives from colliding. I never wanted any part of this, Clara. I was terrified. Julian interjected. Last night, did Liam get in touch? Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. He called around 10. He said, the tech gala is tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. You'll play the happy family or I'll destroy you and her both. She looked at me, her voice frail. I knew what he intended. He was going to announce he was leaving me, and he'd destroy my gallery if I resisted. The room was thick with Sophie's quiet weeping. Julian spoke levelly. Miss Hayes, you've admitted to your part in significant financial duress. That has consequences. Sophie's face went pale. But, Julian said, if you give a formal statement and testify for Clara, we can offer you protection. 6 years of Liam's control, freedom from family pressure after 4, Julian offered. And you'll help stop a predator. That has to mean something. Sophie faced me. Clara, I am deeply sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but you had to know. I couldn't let him succeed. I was silent, my thoughts a whirlwind. Part of me wanted to scream at her for enabling his lies. Another part knew she was telling the truth. He had ensnared her in a different kind of trap, but she was just as much his prisoner as I was. Julian laid a file on the table. This is the affidavit. Read it, sign it. Then we get his encrypted files from the Home Office. Sophie's trembling hand reached for the pen and signed. The air was sour with betrayal. Julian and his partner waited by the door. It was 11:40 a.m. on March 12th, and we were going to get the evidence that would bring down my husband's world. Sophie looked exhausted. The circles under her eyes were dark, and her hands trembled as she set her glass down. I had used the morning to absorb it all. Liam's plot to discard me, Sophie's confession, the secret life he had constructed, and my own sister in law trapped in his web of threats. Are you prepared? Julian asked her softly. She nodded and stood. Yes, let's end this. We left in two cars. Julian's driver took us in a tinted SUV, with a second car behind us. Our Gold Coast penthouse was only 10 minutes away, but the ride felt like an eternity. The pristine Chicago street seemed fake. The classic Greystone was a facade, and our terrace garden felt like a prison. My sister in law, Sophie, used her own key to let us in. The apartment was sterile and vacant, modern art, severe furniture, and a vast marble island. It was a magazine spread, a set for a perfect life that never existed. The drives are in his office, Sophie murmured, leading us up the floating staircase. The office had a monolithic desk and a biometric safe. Sophie keyed in the code, her hands shaking as she pulled files from inside. Here, she said, handing a dense external drive to Julian. This has everything. Julian placed the drive on the desk and plugged it in. His tech expert began a forensic copy of the contents. The first file was a business loan agreement from June 7th, 2019. Sophie's signature was right below my husband Liam's. $500,000. I stared at the screen, a cold sickness spreading through me. Liam had made her the only guarantor on a loan for one of his startups. Why did you sign this? I asked, my voice strained. Sophie wouldn't look at me. I needed capital for my first architecture project. I believed in his plan, but when the funding vanished in 2020, I lost it all. I was bankrupt in 6 months. Julian pulled up another file, a spreadsheet of her payments. She had repaid $100,000 over 4 years. The outstanding amount was $400,000. That's an impossible burden, the tech specialist said. I know, Sophie whispered. I tried, but Liam just added penalties and interest. I was drowning. The next folder made my stomach clench. A folder named Voicemails, with 50 recordings from Liam's phone, from September 2020 to November 2023. Julian played the first. Sophie, you are 3 months behind. Find the money by Christmas, or I tell Dad you blew his investment. You lied about your firm. It was a failure from the start. They'll cut you off. Don't push me, Sophie. My hands trembled as Julian played another file and then another. They were all the same: vicious threats, insane demands, and vows to make the family exile her if she didn't comply. Some were spoken calmly, others detailed how he would make her a pariah. He held this over you all this time, I said, barely breathing. Sophie finally looked at me, her eyes full of shame. I had no escape, Clara. I couldn't tell them. I thought if I kept paying, he'd eventually back off, but he just wanted more control over me. The associate finished the copy and packed his gear. It's by the book, he told Julian. Financial abuse, emotional blackmail, psychological warfare. He used her failure to control her. Julian nodded, his expression grim. Sophie, you were his target but also his tool. You knew things and your silence let him continue. The lawyer's words were harsh. The court will consider your cooperation now. This affidavit is a good first step. Sophie dabbed at her eyes. I know I should have spoken up. I was trapped. Miss Vance slid a document across the table, the statement Sophie had just provided. She set it down before her. This confirms your testimony against Liam. In return, this firm will insulate you from legal repercussions. Is that understood? Yes, Sophie whispered. Sign here. Sophie took the pen, and her signature was finally steady. I stared at the insurance rider, my stomach twisting into a knot. We were so happy about the baby, but one item was wrong. A policy for a new sculpture at a River North address I'd never heard of. What is this piece? I asked myself. The question was still in the air when he came in. Liam glanced at the document. It's a corporate asset, Clara, for tax purposes. I understand that, I said, but it's a huge policy. I should at least know something about it. His expression became cold and he slowly shook his head. You don't need to be concerned with it. It's handled. He ended the call and gave me a quick kiss. I have to head out. Let's not discuss this again. After the door clicked shut, I looked at the rider. I tried to trust him, but a primal instinct told me he was hiding something. I couldn't shake the feeling. I sat at my laptop just after 3 p.m., my pulse hammering. The secret sculpture, his angry denial, it all felt like an elaborate deception. I searched the address in the city's property database. Oh God, I whispered into the quiet penthouse. The unit was held by a shell company. The registered agent was Amelia Croft, my sister in law's best friend. Her name hit me like a punch to the gut. Amelia had moved to Chicago in 2022. I always thought she was a bright, ambitious artist. I was the one who introduced her to the gallery scene, who celebrated her first big sale. Or so I had believed. I found her social media page. A new post showed Amelia in a stunning Chicago penthouse, smiling for the camera. Behind her was the exact sculpture from Liam's insurance policy. The caption said, "Finally settled in my new home. So thrilled to be here." My thoughts raced to make sense of the betrayal, my voice shaking. What is happening? I placed a hand over my belly. I had to see it for myself. Our child's future was at stake. I snatched my keys from the bowl. I took a deep, steadying breath. Last spring, in 2023, Amelia supposedly got a new apartment. The address from her geotagged post on May 1st was a match. My phone held all the proof I needed. I stared at my screen in the driver's seat, then started the car. I made a silent promise. 60% of my energy for my baby, 40% for destroying this lie. The River North neighborhood. We used to spend so much time here, my mind flashed. Wait, Amelia, isn't that... The sentence died in my throat. That's not the story he gave me. The truth began to crystallize. I see now. The story I had been fed was a fabrication. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My husband was feeding his ego, not building our future, I understood now. Amelia was his partner in this charade. He needed the validation to patch his own insecurities. Hot tears burned my eyes. I imagined Amelia's fake sympathy and her constant knowing smile. She was a parasite, not a friend, and my husband had set her up in luxury, right in my own city. So, what is the real story? I said to the silent car. I opened her profile one more time. This was posted in 2023. It's a triumphant photo, but a key person is absent. My husband is nowhere in the frame. The success is all Amelia's. I enlarged the photo, and in the reflection on the polished steel, I saw them, standing together. The date was still the same. The document on the screen was reality. His promises were the fraud. Who is behind this? I murmured. Amelia Vance, the evidence screamed back. The wire transfer was dated just after our anniversary. I'd left the party early, feeling the first wave of morning sickness, while she stayed behind, the ever supportive colleague. I never suspected a thing. I tilted my head against the leather seat, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Why hide the deed to the Back Bay condo? It was obvious. When a man like Ethan starts an affair, as his new investment fund is launching, he buries every trace. That requires both financial and personal distance. If Ethan had been transparent in 2024, the affair would have been exposed instantly, naturally. So Amelia provided the cover. Of course, by registering the Shell Corporation in her name, she allowed him to maintain his pristine reputation while she laundered his secrets. Without a paper trail, there were no difficult questions. Their affair could flourish in the shadows. I typed the address into the GPS. And what then? Ethan simply continues the deception. Not exactly, I said to myself. It was far more insidious. Ethan had been deliberately making me think I was losing my mind. It is an instinct women possess from birth. Had I ignored that nagging feeling, he would have succeeded. He'd have concealed a 2 year affair, and the betrayal would have merely changed its disguise. They both would have triumphed while I raised our baby on money he had embezzled. But I will not allow that, I whispered. I refuse to be their victim. My own resolute face reflected in the dark screen. That's when I chose a different path. Expose him, use his downfall to build my strength, and let the whole charade crumble. It is cleaner. No arguments, no doubt. I pulled into the parking garage across from the law firm. So, the overinsured painting was not merely a way to hide their affair. It was designed to rob me of all power, so Ethan could either gaslight me into submission or ruin my credibility and seize our shared assets. Precisely, I affirmed. I felt sick. Everything I thought our life and future was, it was all a lie. Amelia Vance had actively helped him embezzle from his own investment fund. She had diverted capital that belonged to our family, and she did it to shield Ethan and their secret life. What's the next step? I asked, my voice thin. I stared at the towering building. I am filing for divorce. My attorneys will launch a full forensic audit of his entire fund. That is how we will definitively connect them and prove Ethan financed her entire lifestyle. The proof is irrefutable. I nodded to myself. I am forwarding the fraudulent insurance policy, along with the certified records from the shell company. I have already retained my family's legal team. They are ready to move. Thank you, I whispered, the words feeling small. My expression hardened. My father thought you were a prodigy, Ethan. He genuinely championed your success. I am so ashamed of this. I should have seen the warning signs. The phone's display went dark. I sat in the silence, a hand resting on my stomach, gazing out at the city lights. We are going to get through this, I promised the small life inside me. I agreed, yet felt frozen. I could only imagine my husband in that condo 5 years from now, selecting a gift for another woman, and how Ethan, the man I cherished, had engineered this entire catastrophe. I finally forced the car door open. I used the spare key hidden inside his old economics textbook. I am prepared to expose everything tomorrow. He had pleaded with me. Please, Olivia, don't. It was too late. I got out, my legs trembling. My world was collapsing, and I had no idea if it could ever be rebuilt. The Boston bank vault smelled of old paper and steel. I arrived at 3 o'clock, and the branch manager, Mr. Harris, greeted me. He was a stern man with weary eyes that suggested he'd seen every kind of secret. Mrs. Sterling, he said formally, the deposit box is ready for you. This way. We walked down quiet, carpeted corridors to a heavy, polished door. Inside, a single security light illuminated stacks of encrypted hard drives, the evidence of their collusion. I never imagined this side of my husband, an expectant father. He had systematically defrauded his partners. I inhaled deeply and indicated one drive. They changed on October 5th, 2024. He claimed it was a donor conference. He lied. I highlighted two major capital calls in the ledgers. These were clearly an internal scheme. Look at the routing. Both from the fund's capital reserves, with no partner authorization. If you were just rebalancing assets, the wires would be external and traceable. The forensic accountant was blunt. Two textbook examples of fraudulent conveyance. Add to that a suspicious lack of compliance flags on that account. His partners were completely unaware. Her tone was clinical, but her gaze was piercing. This was a calculated theft, Mr. Davies, not a strategic error. She pushed a thick file across the table to him. Davies collected the file and we departed. His associate Miller waited by their town car. Wallace is at the office. He has something critical to show you. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. Wallace, a junior analyst and a kind soul, had left me a panicked, cryptic voicemail last week before going silent. 20 minutes later, we were in a soundproofed boardroom. Davies motioned for me to sit. Wallace was there, his fists clenched. He looked wrecked, his face edged with worry, his eyes bloodshot. The moment he saw me, he jumped to his feet so abruptly his chair clattered to the floor. He practically fell to his knees. What is all this? I whispered, staring at the laptop Wallace was holding, a recovered series of encrypted messages. I read the opening line, and my own hands began to tremble. Ethan's words, so confident and familiar, filled the screen, but their content was a nightmare. The view from the condo is perfect, he had messaged Amelia. Completely private. Her sharp, eager response appeared underneath. The offshore account is active, she had written. A quiet liquidation is so simple to execute this quarter, my love, especially while she's so distracted. My heart plummeted. Their exchange was cold and transactional. They referenced the $5 million fraudulent art insurance policy. They discussed how moving the capital now would create a clean slate before the next round of funding. They planned their crime like a corporate merger. She's getting suspicious, Ethan wrote curtly, asking about the latest appraisal. Amelia's reply was chilling. Don't worry about it. I can handle Olivia. She thinks I'm her closest friend. The conversation ended there. The room was deathly quiet. My mind raced. His recent evasiveness about the fund's performance, the way he would dismiss my inquiries about their net worth. It was all a deception. The man I loved, the father of my child, was looting our future to fund a life with her. He had constructed our entire marriage on a foundation of deceit. Ethan Sterling, the wunderkind of Boston finance. He told everyone I was his bedrock. In reality, I was just another line item on his balance sheet to be managed. For a moment, I considered going straight to the SEC, but Ethan's influence in this city was immense. His legal team would kill the story before an investigation could even begin. They would paint me as an emotional, unstable, pregnant wife. I needed more than just text messages. I needed a case that was airtight. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for a litigation firm my father had always held in high regard. Sterling and Locke, corporate raiders in suits. I explained my situation, my voice now firm. They were sharp, professional, and had an investigative team on standby. Are you positive about this timeline? Mr. Sterling asked, his face a grim mask. I nodded, clutching a glass of ice water. Then this is our first move. We secure every piece of evidence you have. That evening, we gathered in a boardroom with a commanding view of the harbor, a room where empires were built and destroyed. His meeting with new investors, I stated, my voice devoid of warmth. He told me it was a crucial fundraising dinner, just another lie. Mark, their investigator, polished his glasses. Let us see what our financial wizard is truly hiding. He nodded toward the large monitor. And we have contact. Ethan's black sedan pulled into a private valet service. He stepped out, the image of East Coast power, in a perfectly tailored suit. Seconds later, Amelia joined him. She looked sleek and confident, everything I no longer felt. He didn't just greet her, he drew her in, a hand resting on the small of her back with a possessive air that turned my blood to ice. It was the same way he held me in our engagement photos. We were watching a live feed from a surveillance drone. Mark pulled up their audio from a directional mic, their words scrolling across the screen as a transcript. Everything is set for this weekend, Ethan said. Once the final wire goes through, the fund will be nothing but an empty shell. And what about her audit? Amelia had asked. No legal standing until the divorce is filed, he replied. His words precise. By the time her lawyers get access, it will look like a tragic market downturn. My husband, the father of my baby, the man beta testing our complete financial ruin. Olivia is clueless, he continued, his tone thick with condescension. She is far too busy picking out furniture for the nursery to notice a few missing million. A hot, violent rage burned through my shock. He was using our child as a cover story for grand larceny. The nausea was churning in my stomach. They discussed my life's work and inheritance as a rounding error to be erased. Mark's voice was low. We have him. This is conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It is more than enough. But I could see the raw ambition in Amelia's eyes on the screen. This was never just about the affair, was it? I asked. He was already pulling up new windows on the screen. One moment, he murmured. A dizzying chart of offshore accounts appeared, linking Ethan's fund to an anonymous entity registered solely to Amelia. They have been systematically draining the primary fund for months, Mark confirmed, defrauding your initial investment capital. As his wife and the first backer, you were the single biggest threat. You would have seen the shortfalls eventually. This was their end game. I wasn't just a wife he was tired of, I was a witness he needed to silence. The insurance policy was incidental. The real prize was getting rid of me to protect their fraud. My own husband, Richard, was plotting my death to secure a biotech scam with his mistress. The room began to tilt. Her envy is a wildfire, Maya said grimly. She doesn't just want Richard. She wants this house, your reputation, your entire world. I stared at the burner phone, at the woman planning to systematically erase me. After this weekend, we start fresh, I read from Chloe's text. The payout covers his debts, we cash out your shares, and we disappear. We'll be in Monaco by Christmas, Richard replied with a simple heart emoji. To our new life. A life built upon my death, I whispered, the thought tasting like acid. I pictured them raising a glass to a future that required my erasure. The cruelty of it was absolute. I looked at Maya, my nails digging into my palms. This was never just about an affair. This was about a woman attempting to steal my very identity. It was about a man who would make his own child an orphan for a clean slate. Maya simply nodded. The man is a sociopath. Through the text thread, I saw Chloe type, I love you, Richard. He answered instantly, I love you more. The lie was so smooth, so well rehearsed. It was a line from their twisted script. No more complications after this weekend, Richard wrote. Maya closed the message app. The silence in the study felt heavy. She looked at me, her gaze unwavering. What's your next move, Elena? The terrified woman from before was gone. Chloe isn't just his lover, Maya confirmed. She's the architect of the scientific fraud. She's been manipulating the clinical trial data since he hired her as his lead researcher. This entire scheme has her fingerprints all over it. She showed me Chloe's professional history, a pattern of ethical violations. How much is he paying her for this? I breathed. Maya pointed to a single line item. He wired 250,000 to her offshore account last week. A finder's fee for my permanent exit. My heart hammered. Does she know about the baby? I asked, my voice tight. Maya shook her head. I don't believe so. To Richard, you and the baby are just a single problem. To Chloe, you are the final barrier to be removed. His love, our marriage, it was all just an elaborate con. Maya closed her laptop. The plan is here. The proof is solid. We could call the police right now. I took a slow breath, picturing Richard arriving home, playing the doting husband. I had to see it through myself. Keep tracking them, I told Maya. I want to know everything. In a few hours, Richard would come home, kiss me, and feign interest in my day, thinking his secret was safe. But it wasn't. I had the burner phone, I had everything. So what is the play? Maya asked. I leaned back, a cold resolve settling over me. We spring his own trap. He thinks he's taking his pregnant wife for a romantic weekend in the Berkshires. He has no idea I'll be waiting. And when he makes his move, we finish this. Maya almost smiled. He'll never see it coming. I nodded, my pulse steady. By Sunday, this would be over. But first, we had to expose the full extent of his partnership with Chloe. Richard's sleek Boston office, once a symbol of his brilliance, now felt like a tomb of lies. It was nearly 10, the brownstone silent, but my sister Maya was analyzing corporate filings, her eyes scanning the screen. She cross-referenced patents, shell companies, and archived data. Here, Maya said, tapping the tablet. Richard Thorne, let's see what's beneath the surface. A web of stolen intellectual property appeared. A timeline of scientific theft. Maya highlighted a patent in red. A stolen gene therapy formula from a defunct lab, she explained. Acquired in April 2019, the month Genovate collapsed. It was the foundation of Richard's company. An old photo showed Richard smiling with Chloe at a conference. That stolen science was their launchpad. Precisely, and it wasn't just the theft. Look at these dozens of small payments between 2019 and 2020. Tiny sums, 1,000 here, 2,000 there, to a data broker. The total is over $100,000. I stared at the records, a chill moving through me. Richard had been buying silence for years. Each transfer was another layer of his deceit. It gets worse, Maya said, opening another encrypted file. A second set of expenses for a medical summit in Geneva from August 2023 for $80,000, a summit he never attended. I crossed my arms. A work trip or a vacation? A vacation? Maya confirmed the flight booking was for two. He was sloppy, Maya noted, but I found the confirmation. Booked through the company, but paid from Richard's private account. I just watched the fog settle over the city. Richard wasn't just a liar. He used his company to fund his affair for years. Why risk it? I asked. He's at the top of his field. Why gamble an empire for a subordinate? Maya pulled up an old trade journal article. Headline: Promising biotech startup fails amidst scandal. Dr. David Chen, its 32-year-old founder. His company was ruined in May 2019 by a smear campaign. The photo showed a brilliant man looking defeated. He had the same passion my husband once faked. Richard's biggest rival, I whispered. Maya scrolled. Chen was about to secure major funding. He would have crushed Richard, but then anonymous sources leaked falsified clinical data. She found another article about Chen's funding collapsing from May 10th, 2019. The evidence against Chen was a phantom, Maya said. No source, no paper trail. Without proof of the fraud, he couldn't defend himself. The narrative took hold. David Chen was finished. No company, no career, just professional exile. A heavy sense of injustice filled the room. Richard leaked the false data. He had to have. Meyer explained he likely framed the young CEO with lies he created, giving Richard the market to himself. Maya closed the browser and sat back. When Thorne Biologics launched that June, Richard was hailed as the new prodigy. He passed the stolen research off as his own innovation within weeks. Nobody looked too closely. He raised his first 50 million before anyone could ask the right questions. Richard's face would twist in fury if he knew we saw this. He is my husband. He built his entire career on a crime. And his mistress, I asked. Chloe, did she know? Maya opened the file. Chloe Vance, hired in January 2019. Then came project logs and internal memos. Hard to say for sure, Maya said. Their research notes are a disaster. Chloe runs her own division, but Richard approves her budgets. He signed off on a $200,000 retention bonus for her in October 2023. The reason was flimsy. I scowled. A bonus or hush money? Probably both, Maya said. But here is what we know. Chloe helped Richard weaponize the stolen research in 2019 to launch Thorne Biologics. She has been Richard's secret for at least 2 years, and her boss, my husband, ruined an innocent man's life and built an empire on the debris. They were both rotten. I sank into Richard's chair, my head spinning. Richard, Chloe, David Chen. It was a conspiracy of greed and ego, and our home was its command center. My husband's biotech empire, a company he sold as a story of genius, was founded on a crime. What about David Chen? I asked. Is he okay? My sister shook her head. Not really. He teaches science to high schoolers in Cambridge. His career was completely derailed at 32. He is oblivious to who truly engineered his ruin. I watched the fog roll over the river, shrouding the lab Richard built. He sold his morals for fame. I understand ambition, but not his form of cruelty. He destroyed a man and deceived me. His entire life is a fraud. So, what is the plan? I asked. My sister's expression hardened. We expose him tonight at the Innovators Charity Gala. Richard expects an award. Instead, we'll be waiting. We have every fabricated patent, every offshore account. When he takes the stage, we expose it all. And Chloe, my sister added, standing up, we're leaking an anonymous data packet to her firm's board. It is a complete demolition of his world. We let Richard have his moment of glory. He will come home to you, thinking his kingdom is secure, and then it all turns to ash. A public takedown, digital proof with no escape. You're the one facing him, Elena, my sister said. Are you ready? I thought of Dr. Chen, his life's work stolen. I thought of our marriage, a constructed lie. I thought of Chloe in my husband's arms. I thought of my sister, who always said your principles are everything, a lesson Richard ignored. Yes, I said, I am. My sister nodded. Good. One last review. We map out the confrontation, we plan for every contingency, we get one chance at this. We cannot let him charm his way free. Maya gave a grim smile. This will be one gala he wishes he had skipped. I stood, my body trembling. Tonight, at his event, it all ends. Richard will try to lie, and I'll be there to stop him. I just hoped I was strong enough to burn his kingdom to the ground. The living room of our Boston brownstone felt large and sterile, lit by gallery lights. A single white couch faced the windows, a perfect untouched centerpiece. At the kitchen island stood my sister Maya, her face like stone. I watched from a leather chair as a diagram of offshore accounts lit up the boardroom monitor. My brother Liam was at my side. The harsh office lighting carved new lines into his face, his hand trembling slightly as he sipped his coffee. He was the one who unraveled it all after an anonymous tip sent him down this rabbit hole. Now he was here helping me make my husband answer for his crimes. Amelia, I began, my voice steely, we get one chance at this. If we blow it, Marcus walks away with the firm, the money, and the narrative. I refuse to let him win. Liam nodded, his expression grim. I know. I pointed at the screen. His entire empire, built on a foundation of lies. At 10 a.m. today, Marcus Vance will walk into this room expecting a promotion. He thinks he's untouchable, but he has no idea we're about to detonate his entire life. My brother Liam highlighted a floor plan. The recording device is in this fountain pen, he instructed. It guarantees a clear audio capture of the room. We'll get every word. You'll also have this message queued up. He showed me a draft on his phone. This is our trigger. Send that text and the evidence packet goes to the SEC in 10 seconds. My other brother asked, what if he gets suspicious, spots the pen? Liam glanced at me. Plausible deniability. Tell him you're recording notes for the baby book. His ego is massive enough to believe that. What if he refuses to talk? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Then you leave, Liam stated calmly, and we release the files anyway. But a confession is what we need. We need Marcus talking about the insider trading, about ruining the Harrison Group, about what he planned for you. His own words are the nail in his coffin. Liam switched the view to his attack strategy. A series of timed emails to financial journalists were ready. The Wall Street Journal is on standby. Our attorneys are in place. The moment this goes live, the story will be everywhere. The other financial news networks will receive the data dump minutes later. My team and I have a conference room on this floor. And my role? I questioned. Liam met my gaze. You are the catalyst. Your job is to get him into this boardroom alone. Stick to the plan. Understood, I said, my jaw clenched. Liam turned back to me. Amelia, you need to make him confess. Ask about Simone. Ask about the laundered funds. Make him believe you're broken, pregnant, and just want to secure a future for your child. The more he brags, the more evidence we have. What if he brings Simone into the room? I worried, my hands fidgeting. Or his attorney? We have tabs on them both, Liam reassured me. Simone is in a meeting with the marketing team. His lawyer is in Zurich. We have confirmation of their schedules. If that changes, you'll be the first to know. He checked his watch. It's 8 o'clock. Amelia, you need to call Marcus. Convince him you're ready to sign the postnup. The phone felt impossibly heavy, my pulse hammering in my ears. Liam slid a list of bullet points across the table. Not a script, he clarified. Just hit these notes. You're exhausted. You're sorry for fighting him. You just want your family back together. Marcus has to believe you've given up. I inhaled sharply and made the call. He answered on the first ring. Amelia. His voice was a practiced performance of concern. Honey, what's wrong? I let my voice crack. Marcus, I'm done. You've won. I can't fight anymore. All this stress isn't good for the baby. A short pause followed. I could picture his smug grin. What are you telling me, sweetheart? I'm telling you, I'll sign the papers. Let's meet at the office before the board meeting. We can get it done then. A longer silence. You're certain? I pictured him with her, Simone, a hand resting on her shoulder. I'm certain. I just need peace. All right, Marcus said, his tone dripping with fake sincerity. That's my girl. I'll have my legal team meet us. You're making the right choice. I know I lied. I'll see you then. I love you, Amelia. I disconnected the call. I ended the call. My brother Liam observed me from his command center of monitors. He gave a slow, measured nod. That was flawless, he said. He bought every word. I put my phone down, my hands still trembling. He pulled me into an embrace. You were brilliant, he said softly. You have no idea how strong you are. Liam went back to his screens. Okay, that gives us 2 hours. I'm running a final diagnostic on the audio feed and the data packet for the SEC. Today, we dismantle Marcus Vance's entire world. Let's get into position. His focus was total. This is actually happening. We can still pull the plug. No, I stated, my voice solid. He's not getting away with this. Not this time. Liam met my eyes, then nodded once. Okay. Just remember your breathing exercises. It's going to be an intense morning. I stood up, feeling my legs shake. After this is done, he said softly, I'm taking you and my new nephew somewhere quiet and safe. You're finally going to get the peace you deserve. Tears started to form in my eyes. Across Boston, Marcus was likely toasting his victory with Simone. He thought he'd already won. He was wrong. Today, the world he built on deceit would come crashing down around him. Before I step into that boardroom to face the man who shattered my life, type the word justice if you think I have the strength to finish this. I could really use the encouragement. A brief note. Some of the following events have been compressed for this retelling. If you need to step away, please feel free to do so. I walked into the sterile boardroom at 10 a.m. My heart was a drum against my ribs. The small recorder in the fountain pen was on, and the panic button in my pocket felt cold against my skin. Nearby, Liam was in a rented office space, listening to my every breath and watching through a hidden camera feed. I pressed the record button. The glass-walled boardroom was filled with imposing leather chairs and a view of the Boston skyline. I stood near the head of the long conference table, trying to appear composed. At 10:05, the door slid open. A group of 3 entered. Marcus was in the lead, looking smug and impeccable in a designer suit. His lawyer trailed him, a man who always looked worried. And on Marcus's arm was Simone. Her face was a perfect picture of smug victory. Amelia, Marcus cooed, his voice an act of warmth for the office. I'm so glad you decided to be reasonable. I said nothing as they came closer. The amended agreement, his lawyer said, placing a portfolio on the table. We just need your signature on a few pages. He slid the document and a pen toward me. I reached for it, my hand shaking slightly. I looked at the cover and then pushed the pen away. There's one more thing to discuss, Marcus, I said, my voice steady. I pushed the portfolio back to him. His smile tightened. And what would that be? I met his gaze. Let's talk about Project Titan. The atmosphere in the silent room turned frigid. Marcus's expression hardened into steel. Simone's smile vanished. His lawyer, Mr. Davies, interjected, This is not the time. Please, just sign. My eyes remained locked on Marcus. I know about the shell companies, the $80 million. I know about the wire transfers to Panama and the email suggesting I have a tragic accident after our son is born. Marcus's entire persona cracked. He reached for his briefcase on an adjacent chair. You were always too clever for your own good, Amelia, he spat, his voice laced with poison. I took a step back, my thumb finding the panic button, but before I could press it, the boardroom doors swished open again. We all looked. My brother Liam was standing there, flanked by two members of corporate security. It's done, Marcus, Liam announced, his voice carrying an air of finality. Marcus stared, utterly bewildered. Liam, the IT guy. I told you I'd always look out for her, Liam said, his eyes fixed on me with some unwavering loyalty. Marcus was trapped, his hand on his briefcase, his gaze shifting between us. What is the meaning of this, Vance? The lawyer stammered, backing away. Be quiet, you idiot, Marcus seethed. Simone grabbed her briefcase, but a look from a security guard stopped her cold. The only sound was my own frantic heartbeat. Then the room erupted into chaos. But it was not the authorities. On the boardroom's giant display, an incoming board member shouted, What in God's name is that? It was a detailed map of offshore accounts and illegal trades. Marcus Vance's corporate headshot was displayed next to the incriminating evidence for all to see. Liam's voice came through my hidden earpiece, calm amid the storm. Phase 2 is a go. Marcus's hand dropped from his briefcase. Through the glass, he saw the horrified faces of his senior partners. He let it fall to the floor. The head of security spoke into his comms. Vance is contained. Marcus sank into his chair at the head of the table, his face a mask of fury and shock. Simone collapsed onto the floor next to him, letting out a choked sob. The lawyer stood frozen, a statue of disbelief. Our own security team entered the room, their actions professional and swift. One agent addressed the lawyer while another read Marcus his rights. Marcus Vance, you are under arrest for securities fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Marcus's expression was like granite. He shot me a glare filled with promises of revenge he could no longer keep. Simone began to ramble. It was all him. I swear I didn't know. Let's go, ma'am, an agent said, taking her by the arm. Their lawyer was escorted out without another word. My brother Liam was instantly at my side, his tactical demeanor melting away. Amelia, are you all right? I could only nod, feeling my knees threaten to give out. It's done, he murmured, his voice heavy with relief. It's over. He can't harm you again. The tension of the past few months drained out of me at once, and I leaned against him, finally letting the tears fall from the sheer weight of it all. Liam held me up. It's truly over, he said again. I heard the ding of the elevator taking Marcus, Simone, and the life I once knew away for good. The firm's lead counsel, a sharp man named Chen, approached. Ma'am, the federal agents are on their way. They'll want your testimony. What you and your brother have done is remarkable. I blinked back tears. The ledgers? Was it really enough? It's irrefutable proof, Chen confirmed. Isabel is already cooperating. Chen nodded toward my brother. His forensic accounting was brilliant. Leo just gave a slight shrug. The paper trail was already there. He gestured to a tablet an agent was reviewing. That's a direct map of his entire shadow operation. Leo's face was grim. It's all documented. Every fraudulent contract, every shell corporation. There's no explaining it away. Chen agreed, looking from the tablet to me. We have everything we need. My priority now is getting you home. From the penthouse window, I watched them lead Thorne out a service entrance to an unmarked sedan. Even from 50 floors up, I could feel the heat of his rage. An agent closed the door, and the life I thought I had was officially over. Isabel was put into a different car, her angry words silenced by the thick glass. The lawyer entered a third, his face grim. I saw the vehicles dissolve into Chicago's river of headlights. Leo came and stood beside me. Chen was downstairs with the feds. There was no dramatic confrontation, just the reverberating shock from the boardroom next door. The reality that the nightmare had ended crept in slowly, like a quiet dawn. The architectural empire Thorne built was a fantasy, and it had just vanished. It feels so still, I murmured, the sudden quiet in the opulent office feeling alien. This should be chaotic. Leo wrapped an arm around my shoulders. The most effective takeovers are always the quietest, he said. An agent was carefully tagging items on Thorne's desk. The only noise was a faint siren growing louder in the distance. Leo guided me to a sofa. My hands were shaking, so he held them. It's all right to finally let go, Elara, he said softly. I nodded, the Chicago skyline blurring behind a film of tears. I couldn't seem to stop trembling. Leo flagged down an agent. Could she please have some water? The woman nodded and spoke into her radio. The soft classical music that usually filled the suite had been cut, leaving a profound, unnerving silence. The persona I had crafted in this city, the art gallery openings, the magazine spreads, now felt like it belonged to someone else. The influence, the wealth, the perfect public marriage, all of it was built on a foundation of lies. And now it was dust. So what happens now? I asked my brother, my voice a whisper. Now, he answered with certainty, you and your baby get a fresh start, somewhere far away from all this. He gestured at the beautiful prison that had become my home. Chen returned, holding out a bottle of water. Isabel is spilling everything. She's detailing every partner involved in the kickback schemes. Thorne Caldwell is facing a very long time in a federal prison. Good, I said, taking a drink. The cold plastic felt solid and real in my hand. No last ditch escape, no frantic cover up. Just the slow, unstoppable machinery of justice finally beginning to turn. Far below, the last government sedan pulled away, its taillights bleeding into the city. The flashing blue and red lights were gone. The raid was over. I took a deep breath, my first easy one in years. Leo helped me to my feet. I felt a tiny flutter deep inside me, a little kick that was a promise of the future. I looked at Leo. Can we go now? I asked. I wasn't talking about the penthouse. I meant his small, safe apartment over in Lincoln Park. He smiled. Yeah, Elera, let's go home. Chen saw us walking toward the elevator. We will require a formal deposition tomorrow, Mrs. Caldwell. It's just Ilara, I said, without looking back. My brother has my number. The lawyer simply acknowledged. Get some rest. We rode the private elevator down without a word. The crisp night air felt like stepping onto a new planet. We moved past the vacant reception area and out toward the simple, honest life that was now waiting for me. Our car was waiting at the curb, with our legal counsel in an identical sedan behind it. High above, a jet's lights blinked on its approach to O'Hare. Leo's phone buzzed. The digital forensics team is on deck. 2 minutes out. They are prepped to image the primary server. Copy, Leo said. Confirm he has no remote access to wipe the archives. I watched the city lights streak past my window. Our whole life had been funded by his crimes. My future was a fraud. We hadn't secured all the proof yet. If he was fast enough, he could delete everything. My brother Leo squeezed my hand. We are going to bury him, he promised. I nodded. We have to. Our lawyer spoke from the passenger seat. The emergency board meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m. We are seizing control. We present the evidence, detail the fraud, and dismantle his network. Ahead, the towering glass structures of the loop touched the clouds. On the 50th floor, my husband Thorne Caldwell was waiting. Our small party walked into the lobby at 9:45. Our heels clicked sharply on the marble. We were a silent army moving between colossal pillars. The air was heavy with the fragrance of power and greed. Outside, construction cranes pivoted against the sky, their red lights like distant heartbeats. Our lead lawyer guided us, his face resolute. His associate monitored a data feed on a tablet. I stayed close to Leo, clutching my bag. The main boardroom is the objective, Mr. Chen said. I could see the glass-walled room and two figures inside. One was my husband, Thorne. The other was his lead designer and mistress, Isabel. Isabel appeared flawless and composed, even through the partition. She was flanked by three senior partners, like a queen holding court. Chen had us pause outside the door as our team moved to block the other exits. A dozen people from our team entered and sat down, forming a quiet wall of defiance. Chen murmured into his phone, "ET has confirmed it. The network is sealed. Nothing can be erased remotely." He nodded. "Our forensic accountants are inside." Isabel's assistant was clutching a small hard drive, a data purge stick. My stomach tightened. "Is that what I think it is?" I asked quietly. "An evidence scrubber," Chen confirmed. "One press, and every illegal record is gone." He took a deep breath and walked in. My brother Leo and I watched as Chen went to the head of the conference table. He spoke loudly. Thorne Caldwell, this meeting is a formal advisory of legal action. We have an injunction. Please step away from all electronic devices. Isabel's eyes shot to her legal counsel, then to the device in front of her. Three of our tech experts were watching her every move. She glanced at the door, which was now guarded by two of our people. The room was deathly quiet. Then Isabel gave a tight, superior smile. She pushed her laptop away and raised her hands in a mocking gesture of surrender. I'm prepared to cooperate fully, she said, her voice laced with acid. But her associate, a man named Philip, kept his hand on the purge drive. He clutched the device, his thumb poised over the button. Isabel, you can't, Philip begged. It's done, Philip, she said with no emotion. No, he shouted, moving to plug it in. A single sharp command stopped him. Stop. Philip froze. The drive slipped from his hand, hitting the granite table with a loud crack. Philip cursed, snatching his hand back. It confirms, Chen said into his comms, all local ports have been disabled. That drive is useless. Our lawyers advanced. Isabel made no move to resist. She watched with cold disinterest as they handed her a subpoena. Her legal team immediately began a frantic, quiet conference. In moments, they were completely outplayed. Philip was already being led from the room. Chen went straight to my husband. Thorne Caldwell, you are being served with a federal asset seizure and a lawsuit for corporate fraud. Thorne's face was an arrogant blank slate as he took the legal papers. Chen opened his briefcase. Inside were binders filled with documents detailing offshore accounts and laundered money. Illicit contracts, Chen announced. Dozens. We have confirmation of at least $30 million. He signaled his people, secure the room. With Leo's hand on my arm, I was finally able to stand. I watched as security led Thorne out of the room. He paused and looked straight at me. For a moment, our gazes locked. He almost smiled. Then the boardroom doors clicked shut. Isabel was taken to a separate room for questioning. Her lawyers were already in full damage control mode. Our attorney, Chen, came back to us, looking spent. It's done, he said. Thorne has lost control of the firm. My legs felt weak. Leo supported me. We won, I whispered. He nodded. Justice. Chen's phone buzzed. We have it. Thorne's original signed charter. It's all here. The instructions for Isabel, the hidden legacy clauses. It's a legal time bomb, Chen said, his voice serious. This unwinds his entire scheme. He looked at me. The board now has an undisputed case. We'll need your leadership, Ilara, starting now. Can you do that? I nodded. I'll be ready. Chen offered a hand. Thank you. Your courage was remarkable. I accepted it, my eyes suddenly stinging. Leo and I walked out into the main lobby. Lawyers were finalizing papers, the entire floor humming with action. As we went to the elevator, I looked at the empty boardroom, its deceit exposed. This was the beginning of a new chapter. The arbitration had been a quiet war. The room was tense. Reporters, worried shareholders, and my family waited outside. His mentor, Daniel Peterson, sat with his wife, Anne. Their own son just looked at the ground. I sat with my own legal team. Leo was seated right behind me. The room felt heavy. It was October the 18th, 2025. The year of lies had finally unraveled. After months of fighting in the shadows, today was the reckoning. The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. All rise. Judge Ramirez entered, her reputation for sharp, decisive rulings preceding her. She settled at the bench as the defendants were brought in, clad in their tailored, somber suits. Richard appeared first, refusing to meet my eyes. His partner in crime, Olivia, followed, her face a pale, rigid mask. A city official they had bribed, Mr. Davies, shuffled in next, looking ill. Finally, their offshore financer, a man known only as the Cipher, strolled in as if arriving for a casual lunch. They assembled with their lawyers. We are convened for the final ruling in the matter of Thorne Development Group versus Richard Thorne and his co-conspirators, she declared. My lawyer rose, a tablet in his hand. Regarding the charge of fraudulent property transfers, we find Richard Thorne liable. For conspiracy and breach of ethical conduct, liable. Each word was a hammer blow. Olivia Hayes, for complicity in fraud and professional malpractice, liable. Councilman Davies, for gross negligence and accepting bribes, liable. The cipher, for violating international banking laws and conspiracy, liable. My lawyer took his seat. The board requests the court award maximum financial damages from all guilty parties, Your Honor. Judge Ramirez gave a slight nod. This court will permit one final statement. Mrs. Thorne, if you wish. My legs felt weak as I stood. Owen squeezed my hand a final time before I approached the witness stand. I stared at Richard, who was now intently studying his manicured nails. My husband didn't just break our wedding vows, I began, my voice tight. He betrayed the very foundation of this company. His own father, Arthur Thorne, was his mentor, and Richard ruined his name because he trusted his son. He schemed to steal every asset from me and our unborn child with zero remorse, my voice gaining power. He must answer for what he did. I needed him to see that his influence and wealth couldn't protect him from the truth. Richard's sister, Isabel, wept quietly in the gallery behind me. He deserved this, I thought. His own family needed this resolution. My hands trembled as I returned to my seat beside Owen. The judge gazed sternly at the defendants. Any remarks before I deliver my judgment? Olivia's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client insists. It's fine, Olivia snapped, her voice like ice. Her lawyer froze, then sat. The judge glanced at Richard, who said nothing. So be it, she said, tapping her screen. Olivia Hayes, your claim to ownership of the Seaport Development Project is denied. I am also nullifying the forged deed transfers you filed last year. A wave of whispers went through the courtroom. Olivia's expression was stone. Richard Thorne, for your central role in this conspiracy, your controlling interest in the company is hereby terminated. He sagged in his chair, head falling into his hands. Amelia Thorne, because you exposed this entire scheme, your original co-founder's shares are to be fully reinstated. Amelia's eyes closed as a single tear traced a path down her cheek. The judge's final words were steel. This judgment is binding and takes effect now. All company holdings, including the $75 million Apex Tower Fund and the $8 million from the waterfront lot sales, will be overseen by the new majority shareholder. My heart hammered in my chest. Richard's desperate play had been utterly destroyed. That $8 million will be redirected to the Boston Housing Initiative, fulfilling the late Arthur Thorne's memorial pledge. A pang of sadness hit me. For Richard's father, for the legacy he should have had. The judge's sharp tone confirmed their fate. This court is adjourned. Two officers escorted the seething Richard and the strangely serene Olivia from the courtroom. She glided past me without a glance. His sister looked back once, her expression a mix of grief and shame. And then she was gone. Isabel found me in the hallway, touching my arm gently. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes full of unshed tears. Thank you for protecting my father's legacy. I pulled her into an embrace, two women shattered by the same man, finding a moment of grim victory. As the elevator doors shut, my brother Owen touched my elbow. Dad would be so proud of you, Amelia, he said quietly. I wiped away a tear. It's really over. Almost, Owen replied, showing me a small encrypted key. Your father-in-law left one last file for you. I gave him a puzzled look. What is it? Owen's voice dropped. His true vision, the community project he was designing for the city, for families like ours. Come on, we have an appointment. We stepped out of the building, and the crisp Boston air felt like a new beginning. The fight was done, but one part of the real legacy was yet to be claimed. The old law firm in the financial district felt worlds away from the courthouse. No tension, no defendants, just me, Owen, and Arthur's longtime attorney in a book-lined office. It was early December 2025, a month after the trial, and the company's true charter was being restored. Mr. Gable sat with us, the man who had guided Arthur Thorne's career. He looked tired but content. On the monitor was a sealed document, the firm's original articles of incorporation dated May 5th, 2012, locked with Arthur's own biometric seal. The lawyer, a kind man in his 70s, began. With the fraudulent deeds now voided, we can finally execute the original charter of Thorn Development. Dated May 5th, 2012, control reverts to the designated successor. He took a breath. 55% of the company, valued at $60 million, to my daughter in law, Amelia Thorne. 30%, valued at $30 million, is to establish the Thorne Foundation for Urban Renewal. I gasped. After all of Richard's greed, his father's dream was coming true. The transfer was authorized. Mr. Gable shook my hand. Your father in law had a great dream, Amelia. I'm so thankful we could save it. Thank you, I whispered back, for believing in it. An hour later, Owen and I were in his office, starting a video conference. A woman with intelligent eyes appeared on the monitor, architectural models of community spaces arrayed behind her. I could hear the distant, joyful sounds of children playing. Mrs. Thorne, she began with a kind smile. I'm Dr. Lena Petrova. Thank you for making time for this call today. Of course, I replied, my voice shaky. Her face was filled with empathy. First, let me say how deeply sorry we are for your family's ordeal and for all that you've endured. Arthur Thorne's commitment to this city was legendary. We are privileged to be the custodians of that vision. The $30 million endowment will officially launch the Thorne Renewal Project across the city. It will fund affordable housing developments and community centers for Boston's working families, which was your father-in-law's passion project. Tears started to cloud my sight. I could only nod in response. Dr. Petrova went on. We are also creating the Arthur Thorne Grant for young architects. Arthur's belief in building for people, not just for profit, is a powerful legacy. The initial fund has already secured $10 million in matching city grants. Because of him, over 100 families will have new homes next year. I pressed a hand to my mouth, overcome with emotion. Owen rested a reassuring hand on my back. Last week, Dr. Petrova said, Arthur's longtime assistant Maria stopped by. She wanted me to pass on a message to you. Her voice softened. She said, Arthur always wanted to build things that last. He knew Amelia saw the city the way he did. He said you were the true heir to his dream, not just his company. The tears came freely then, a torrent of grief and gratitude. Dr. Petrova waited with gentle patience, her own eyes moist. When I finally met her gaze, she said, he saw the good in you, Amelia. He wanted to leave behind a legacy of compassion. Thanks to you, that legacy is now secure. We will never forget what Arthur Thorne stood for, and we will never forget your part in it. Thank you, I managed to say. This means everything. Dr. Petrova nodded. Our doors are always open. Please come visit and see the communities you are helping to build. I'd love that, I said as the call ended. Owen leaned back in his seat. It's done, Amelia, really done. Richard and Olivia are finished. The company is yours. The foundation is real. You won. He slid a tablet across the desk. One more thing. This is from Arthur. The papers are signed, Chloe. Julian's stake in the architectural firm is officially yours. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the final transfer agreement on the tablet. This entire practice was a testament to his lies, Liam said gently. He raised it on pure ego. You can give it a soul for your little boy. How can I possibly start? I murmured. Liam's expression softened. By designing things that help people build a foundation he can be proud of. A fresh determination settled in me. Okay, I breathed. It's all over, I sighed with relief. My brother Liam put a steadying arm around my shoulders as we exited the attorney's office into the brisk Boston air. A gentle flutter from my baby reminded me of the future. It was Christmas Eve, 2025. 8 months had passed since a credit card statement for a secret nursery destroyed everything. The lights of the Zakim Bridge glittered outside my new condo window. This was my sanctuary now. The guest room, once for his clients, was being transformed into a calm, gentle nursery. My mother's classic storybooks already filled the bookshelf. I'd painted the walls a soothing robin's egg blue. A mobile with tiny sailboats floated above the empty crib. This space felt like the true center of my world. I flicked on a dim nightlight, illuminating a framed picture of my grandparents, glowing with happiness on their own wedding day. Next to it lay his first grainy sonogram photo. A note from my mother was tacked above it: Create a life you cherish. This was the foundation I was building for my son. The door creaked open. Ethan held two steaming mugs. He looked tired but optimistic. It's time? He asked. I nodded. I'm ready. My new architecture firm was officially launching. Our first contract was designing a youth center for an underserved neighborhood. It felt worlds away from Liam's luxury condo developments. Last autumn, Ethan and I drove up to the lake house. We walked along the shore as I untangled my thoughts. Sitting by the water, I deleted the last remnants of my old life from my cloud storage. It was a final, clean severance. Now my small Chicago balcony was filled with herbs. The air of the lake felt crisp and new. The city's skyline glittered, a backdrop for our fresh start. Ethan gave me my coffee. He presented a small velvet box. Inside was a simple locket from our grandmother, so different from the sculpture I saw on an emailed receipt. A gift for his art dealer. For our new chapter, he murmured. He helped me fasten the delicate chain. I lifted my mug, and he mirrored the gesture. To Chloe, he said, his voice steady, and to my nephew, to designing something real. The dark roast was rich and honest, unlike the life I'd left behind. Below, the lights of Lakeshore Drive flowed like a silent, glowing river. You're going to be a phenomenal mother, Chloe, Ethan said. You're stronger than you realize. My world was being rebuilt, this time on a foundation of truth and family. My reflection in the glass showed a new woman, her hand resting on her stomach. The sting of betrayal from the one you trust most is a uniquely sharp agony. I discovered that when my husband, a real estate mogul, prioritized his latest high rise and its curator over our marriage and our son, all I wanted was to see his world crash. But that bitterness would have poisoned my child's future. I chose to create instead. Never ignore the small cracks before they become a chasm. Find the courage to see what's real. Don't allow fear to make you a partner in your own pain. Forgiveness is for my own peace, not his absolution. He demolished our past, but he won't design my future. My son is my promise. Have you ever endured a betrayal like this? How did you start over? Share this story if it could offer hope to someone else. Please note, these events are dramatized for effect. If this content is too heavy for you at the moment, we invite you to browse other narratives on our channel that you might find more uplifting.